Emily, thanks so much for writing for us, and thanks for joining me today. You've written a wonderful piece with the headline, "The Dangerous Myth of Male Incompetence." Great theme. Why did you want to write about how incompetent we are?
Well, I feel that there's a lot of discussion these days about girls being better. And I think that's often how it is framed, that people say, oh, just girls are better than boys. They're better at everything. And it even, I spend a lot of time talking to parents, and this really translates down even into preferences that people will have about gender of their kids. So we've seen actually several articles in the past even few weeks where people are saying, oh, people are doing IVF to get girls because who would want a boy? What a bunch of incompetent dummies. And that feels like a pretty dangerous to me message, and also not right. And so I was trying to, in writing this piece, sort of understand when people say, well, just girls are better, what do they mean? And I think that at the core, what they mean is boys just seem, and men just seem less competent. And so I wanted to think a little more about why we get that and also what we might do about it.
One of the areas you use is education, which I know you have a strong interest in. You've done a lot of work on, which is, and obviously AIBM has done a lot of work on the big gender gap we see in education. And so the kind of story that boys aren't as good at school, right, is one of the areas of incompetence that you talk about. But you're worried that will become something of a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So talk a bit more about the impact of this dangerous myth in school.
So I think where this comes up most in school is in this time, sort of in middle school, say 7th or 8th grade, when a lot of what we're expecting out of kids is executive function. So we're expecting them to move into a place where their backpack is organized, where they bring their homework on time, where they're able to complete a series of tasks. And this is a place and an age where boys and girls diverge. And you and I have talked about this, this being a kind of core place where girls move forward more quickly, both in the particular skill and in the age. And so you end up with a bunch of 7th and 8th grade kids where the girls are, handing in their homework and putting it in their planner and doing all this stuff. And boys are like, the homework's crumpled in the bottom and it's wrapped up in a tuna sandwich. And it feels like somehow there's something missing in competence. And what I write a little bit there is, I worry that we react to that by saying, oh, well, they just can't do it. They're boys, and we sort of laugh about it, and I'll laugh about it. But I think that there's a sense in which we should both recognize that there are some differences in developmental stage, but also hold kids to a high standard. And I think we want to say, this is a growth edge for you. Like, there are some things you're really good at, and this is not one of them. But it's not that you can't do it. And I worry that in this, that there's a danger of indicating to boys, not just this is something that you're going to have to learn, but like this is something you're never going to get. And that's not true. They are going to get it. And I think we want to be sending the message, you're going to have to work on this because it's a skill. But like other skills, you can do it. You can learn it.
Yeah, so I want to give a plug to the conversation you and I had on your podcast, Emily, a good, great, and long conversation. How far do you scaffold these things, and how far do you kind of use them as a learning opportunity? It's a bit like the idea that kind of, you might have said to girls in the past that, you're just not good at math, right? The whole idea of exactly. I'm just not a math person is like you're saying to boys, well, I'm just not a organized person. I'm not an English person. And it's sort of self-fulfilling rather than pushing through that.
And I think what's interesting about that point is we've absolutely arrived at a place where girls are much more likely to say they're math people. So I think we've shown in that example it is possible to change self-conception or to get to a place where we aren't having that feeling, suggesting to me we could change the self-conception too, but we need to be deliberate about it.
Yeah, and then you move on to talking about something even closer to home for you in terms of your professional interests, and perhaps even in terms of your personal life, which is in the home and fathering. And I'm a father. I've got 3 sons, and particularly because women typically will do more of the early years childcare, that's still an issue that can then create a dangerous myth of male paternal incompetence as well. Yeah. Say a bit more about how you think that plays out.
Yes, I think this starts from a kind of natural almost a natural thing that happens, which is, you know, we have a baby. Mom tends to be quite engaged early on. Maybe she's nursing, she's with the baby more. There's a biological reason that the female birthing partner is going to be with the baby more and is going to learn more quickly to do the many things. And that small initial difference then starts to cascade and to translate to kind of dad doesn't know what he's doing. You know, he can't change a diaper. He can't, you know, he doesn't know how to pack the lunches when they get older. He doesn't know how to make the bottle. It's something that people sort of laugh about. Like, oh, I can't leave my husband home to make the lunches. I've laughed about this. You know, when I put my husband in charge of the lunches, he puts the wrong kind of strawberry jam. And like, you know, that's incompetent. But
it's also, not the end of the world, as I think.
We can get into that. It's also not the end of the world.
Right.
But I think to sort of step back to the beginning part of this, one thing that's really important to remember is when you first have a kid, nobody knows anything, right? Women are not born inherently able to change a diaper. It's not some kind of like genetic skill. It's just that you're doing more of it. And I think some of what happens with this competence gap early on is mom's doing more of it, and then she's better at it because she's done more of it. And then dad doesn't do it, and then he doesn't get better at it, and he doesn't have that opportunity to learn. So we are sort of developing a competence gap where there actually wouldn't have to be one. And that cascades into all kinds of other things. So some of the argument here is I think we just need to give everyone an opportunity to learn, because there is nothing inherent about many of these skills that would suggest that women would particularly be better at them than men would.
Yeah, so it's a cumulative thing, and I think it then can cause some tension, even some resentment in relationships later. So in the early years, the mum might be saying, oh, for God's sake, I'll do it, because I'll do it in half the time and twice as well, thereby adding to this deskilling. But 10 years later, like, in a sense, we've been sending a signal to dad for 10 years that he's just not as good at this whole parenting thing. And then mum turns around and says, why aren't you doing more parenting? So there is a bit of a message here potentially for mums, right?
Absolutely. I think that there's sort of two pieces of this message. And one is just that, you know, there is learning by doing. And if you ask your partner to do something and they haven't done it before, they aren't going to be as good as you are. But that doesn't mean that they will not eventually learn to do it. I think that just that recognition that actually, like, yeah, maybe I could do it faster, but actually having you learn to do it has its own value, and you will be faster next time. And that is how you get to some shared understanding. I think the other piece of this, which I will just say is hard, even in my own life, is when you are the person who does the things in the household, it's easy to get into the idea that there is only one way to do things. And so we were laughing earlier about my complaint about my husband's jam placement, that he puts like the chunky parts of the jam. And I think the message for me is like, actually, the jam's all pretty similar. And so if like the worst thing that happens is there's chunky jam, like I need to let that go. And I think sometimes there's a message of like, your way may be the best way for you, but your partner may also do it just fine. And not every hill is the hill you need to die on.
Yeah, there's an accompanying myth here, which is almost the dangerous myth of maternal perfection, which I think a lot of kind of women absorb too, and then they kind of maybe play that out a little bit of their partner, which is it's the wrong jam, they won't eat it, they'll be hungry, they'll do badly in English and not graduate high school, and it's all your fault.
They're not graduating from high school. Yes.
That's right. There's this kind of those myths. And I was thinking about you the other day when I've noticed that my wife and I have gotten into quite a bad habit, which is that I will drive more. So if we go somewhere in the car, we defaulted to me driving more. And as a result of that, the skill difference has gotten bigger. And so because of that, we think, well, I better drive, especially if it's late at night or raining or something, because I'm a better driver. But it's not because I'm naturally a better driver. It's because I drive more. And we stopped. We said, we've got to get out of this habit because it's becoming self-perpetuating. And I thought it was an exact analogy to what can happen in homes, which is just cumulatively deskilling one partner.
Yeah, and the story I sometimes tell about this is I used to do the cooking and the dishwasher. And then when we had kids, my husband took over the job of like washing the dishes. And he was initially, I felt like pretty mediocre at it. And he's now so good at it that I'm not allowed to touch the dishwasher. It's like gone the opposite direction. Like when I put things in the dishwasher, he takes them out. And he's like, that's not right. That's not correct. And so it is, it's like it's so stark. And it is exactly like there's nothing inherent about the dishwasher, but he just got really good at it for practice. I mean, I think I'm fine, but I agree he does get about 2 to 3 times as much stuff in the dishwasher as I do. So that is part of the skilling.
Yeah, it's skill. Like if my wife does the dishwasher, I have to go and re-optimize it afterwards.
Right,
And she says, what are you doing? And I
Perhaps
say,
you and Jessie should discuss it.
I'm re-optimizing the dishwasher. So to come back to close where we started, which is this actually genuine evidence now you see in adoption and IVF, which is a kind of female preference rather than a male preference. So if you're talking to there's a parent listening now who's saying, look, I don't know if I want a boy or a girl. It sounds like you're saying, look, there might be some different challenges with each of them, but there's no reason why any parent should be more afraid of one sex or the other. There's something kind of awesome about having a boy just as there is about a girl. Is that a fair summary of what you would say to that parent?
Absolutely. I think the way you said about the challenges is exactly right. There are things that are going to be tricky about your son and things that are going to be tricky about your daughter. And the truth is there's so much heterogeneity across kids that if you are thinking like by getting a girl, I'm going to get like a hyper organized, like, you know, person who never like balls up their tuna fish sandwich in their lunchbox, like you could be wrong. And your son may end up like, there's just so much variation and there's so much joy in every kid. And so maybe that's the message.
Yeah, that's a great message. Well, thanks again for writing for us. Really loved the piece. Hope you'll read it and check out your podcast and our conversations. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.